Hey, thanks for joining me today for episode 59 of Podcasting Your Brand. I'm your host, producer Jaime, providing learning lessons for you to podcast your brand. And today I'm going to share a Podcasting 102 topic, website content that boosts your podcast's SEO. This episode is brought to you by my own brand, Flintstone Media. Listen in and let's do this. Hello, and happy Halloween! I hope the occasion has put you in good spirits. You see what I did there? Yeah, nothing too impressive. But happy Halloween! This is one of my favorite days of the year, and I wanted to start you off today with the concepts behind all of these tips and bits of advice that I'm going to be sharing with you on the rest of this episode, so you can understand fully why the effort is worth it in terms of impact on search engine optimization, or SEO, for your impact. The effort to fulfill all of these tips that I'm going to share with you is worth it because there are 4 main positive drivers for SEO that these tips are going to help you out with. Number 1, keeping your site fresh and up to date. Number 2, site relevancy. Number 3, link backs. And number 4, average visitor time on your site. All 4 of those are positive drivers for SEO that are super easy to take advantage of. All right, so let's dive into number 1, keeping your site fresh and up to date. Google loves that. By the way, when I say Google, I'm referring to pretty much any search engine. I'm just saying Google for simplicity's sake. But anyways, as discussed on a previous episode, Google's love for you keeping your website fresh and up to date definitely includes the backend framework and security, but it also refers to the content on your site. And that's what I'm going to get into with you today. Do you keep your site's content fresh and up to date? Well, on this episode, I'll explain how having a podcast that you release episodes on a regular basis for makes this effort super easy. Number 2, site relevancy. Google's entire purpose is to serve up the information the searcher is looking for. Google would have fallen flat on its face if whenever someone searched for a salmon recipe, it brought up a bunch of articles about world record gymnasts and stock market tips or whatever. Google needs to be sure the stuff it bounces back is relevant to the search topic. How do they do that? Well, essentially, and again, without giving too many details that would make your eyes glaze over, but essentially, Google crawls your website on a regular basis with little spider bots, and they're looking for the content that's on it. It collects all kinds of data, but the most relevant information for you to know is that they want to figure out what searches your content matches to. So it crawls your website, all the websites. Can you imagine? That's kind of crazy, but it crawls the websites regularly to see what content is on them. And you score points if your content is not only up to date, but also relevant to what is being searched for. Remember all that talk about keywords over the last couple episodes? Yeah, that's going to come back and rear its ugly head one more time. For now, I'm probably going to bring up keywords at some point again, I'm sure, in the future, but it's going to come up again one more time today. Number 3, link backs. Essentially, these are links from your site to another site and vice versa. And the strongest link backs are ones where the website that you're linking to is also relevant to the search term. So the more link backs that Google has detected on your site that are relevant, the more likely you are to be served up in search results. And strong link backs are also created when the website that you link to also links back to you. And my last conceptual note for you on link backs is that the best link backs are between yourself and another website that Google has deemed to be essentially overall relevant, like a mainstream news outlet, for example. Think NBCnews.com or New York Times' website, right? Those are websites, as an example, that Google deems to have overall solid relevancy. And the fourth concept that we're going to be tapping into today that is super strong as a driver for positive SEO and you should be leaning into, the fourth one is the average visitor time on your website. Now, this is the easiest to explain because it's pretty self-explanatory. You want people to stay on your website longer because the longer on average that people spend on your website, the better. That is a signal to Google that your site provides the information that the people were looking for. If after someone types in a search, they click on a Google search result, and then they spend time on that website milling about, that tells Google, good job. You served up the website that is helpful and is giving them information that they're there to read and find out. They're not going back and dipping back into the well and looking for another site to go to. They're not bouncing off the site. They're staying on. So that is a sign to Google that that website, your website, has the answers that has kept that visitor on after they've searched and click through to your website from the Google search results. So the longer you can keep people on your website, the better. And again, if you want to get into the weeds of any of these concepts, just like I did on the show notes of the last episode, I'm going to include links to my past Business in the Bedroom episodes where I really take deep dives into all of this information. In fact, I would say that one thing that you should definitely check out on those episodes is the content I share on Google Analytics. Because if you can get Google Analytics installed onto your website and reading your website and giving you good information, you're going to be able to tell, for example, how long people on average are staying on your website and then react to how long people on average are staying on different landing pages, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I can already feel myself. Stop it, Jaime. I can already feel myself getting into the weeds. So I'm going to back the train up. Beep, beep, beep. Go to the show notes for the links to the past Business in the Bedroom episodes, and you'll be able to take a deep dive. If you're a super nerd like me, feel free to listen into those. And if not, you are welcome for me pulling back the reins on myself on this episode. All right, so let me dive into these tips with you, okay? So these are the tips that are going to help you improve these SEO concepts. So first up, be sure to post each episode as a separate blog post. Not only does this regular posting of content to your site tell Google that your site is one that is kept fresh and up to date, SEO driver number one, but by having the title of each episode and the description of each episode added as new content to your site, you are touching on SEO driver number two, site relevancy. Remember, you're already being conscious of using keywords in your episode titles and your descriptions on a regular basis because I've told you to on previous episodes, and you are a diligent student of Professor Producer Jaime. So by having each of those titles, each of those descriptions added to your website for each and every single episode, you are increasing your website's relevant keyword count over time. But we're not done yet, because by adding each episode as a separate blog post, you're also touching on the other two SEO drivers as well. So when you create a blog post for your episode on your website, not only have the title and the description, but also have a section for your links in that blog post. And in that link section, you're going to include for every single episode, repeated links to all your stuff. Okay. Your books, your social media, your whatever. Okay. But also, you're going to include links, different links each time, to your guest stuff, if applicable, if you do have a guest, and to any other supportive resources like I do all the time and just mentioned once again, I'll be doing in the show notes for this show. So let's say you cited your guest website and book in the link section of the blog post for that episode. And you're then linking through to each in that link section for that episode on your website, but linking through to their website, to their book. Well, all it takes is for your guests to then link back to you, which I'll be honest, you have little control over other than suggesting it, which we'll get into another time. But if you do, then you have a link back. And that link back to your website adds to your site's relevancy. The relationship between your site linking to them and them linking to you adds to your site's relevancy. I'm keeping things purposely super simple here, but that's the general gist of it. And finally, as a note, I'm putting links on your show notes. You may be thinking, but producer Jaime or Professor Jaime, whatever you want to call me today, if I include links to other websites, then my visitors are going to leave my website. Doesn't that bring down the average time for people visiting my website? Yes, it sure does. If you forget one crucial step. When you create that link to the other website, set it up to open on a different tab. That keeps their browser open to your website, even when they're clicking through to something else. So don't forget that last step. And it's a great general rule of thumb anyway. Anytime you are creating a link on your site that leads to an external link, a web page that's not on your own website, anytime you do that, have it open onto a new tab. Okay. I feel myself tap dancing into the weeds. Once again, I'm going to pull myself back. Once again, but in conclusion, posting each episode onto your website as its own blog post will positively impact all 4 of those SEO drivers that I'm focusing in on with you today. And so what you don't want to do, you don't want to rely on just embedding a player on your website that auto-populates to play all your episodes. It can be very enticing to do so because it's super easy. And once you do it once, you don't have to do it ever again. Most hosting companies now, like Libsyn and Buzzsprout, they provide code just for doing that. And yeah, it's super easy. All you do is you add the code to your website and then you're done. It's a simple one-time effort. And then the player's on your website. And every time you release an episode, it just auto-populates and adds that new episode to the list in the player. But here's the thing, right? That robs you of everything I just laid out for you. Everything I just said would be a driver for SEO if you put up individual blog posts for each episode. So save that embedded player for something else, but not as the main way of providing a means of listening to your show on your website. Instead, go the extra mile to make a blog post for each episode because it pays off massively. And one last note, since I just brought up embedded players, most podcast hosting companies will also provide you simple code again that you can use to embed a player for that specific episode onto your website. And you definitely want to use those. So as you release each episode, grab that code and add it toward the top of the episode blog post so that when people click into the blog post for the episode on your website, they can play the episode right in the blog post when visiting your site. And it'll count towards your downloads too. When people play the episode through an embedded player for you on your blog post, it counts towards your downloads. But by doing it this way, by having the individual episode-specific player on the blog post for that episode and doing that each and every single time, you'll maximize your benefits overall. So create a blog post, add the title, the description, the link section, and also provide the embedded player for the episode so people can listen right then and there. Okay, my next 102 tip for you today. As you continue on your podcasting journey, don't be shy about celebrating your milestones along the way, because that is a great opportunity to add to your website's SEO. What do I mean? Well, everything I just mentioned a moment ago about the benefits of creating a separate blog post for each episode you released will also apply if you create blog posts along the way to share milestones and other news about you, your brand, and your podcast. So each time you hit a milestone of episodes, create a blog post to celebrate it and thank your listeners, your sponsors, guests, and any other supporters you can think of. So when you hit 50 episodes, put up a blog post. 100 episodes, blog post. 200, blog post. You get the idea. And within the context of that blog post, make it very SEO friendly. Talk about the value of your show as far as the content is concerned. Sprinkle in a couple of keywords. Don't stuff it, but sprinkle them in. So it adds to your site relevancy, and each of those posts also helps keep your site fresh. So it helps keep your site fresh, it adds to your site relevancy, and it creates more opportunities for link backs and gives your visitors another reason to stick around to consume content on your site. Boom. And it doesn't stop there. Create blog post updates about all kinds of things, so not just about hitting a number milestone of episodes. If you're a guest on another podcast, create a blog post about it. Were you featured in an article in your local newspaper? Create a blog post about it. Did your book hit the bestseller list? Create a blog post about it. Were you a speaker at a conference? Put that in a blog post. I think you see where I'm going and you get my point. If your activity is related to the content value of your show, each and every news update and blog post about you, your business, and your show will add to your website's SEO and give Google lots of reasons to serve it up in search results. And the third habit that I want you to begin incorporating into your podcast growth process is to create blog posts that, rather than providing an update, like an episode post or a milestone post would do, create blog posts that are blog posts in the truest sense. They're informational, they're educational, or they're opinion-based posts, right? So first off, one thing that these do even more directly than the other two types of posts that I mentioned is to really position you as a thought leader and a resource. And then people want to keep coming back to you and to recommend your site to others. So everything else still applies. It keeps your site content new, relevant, well-linked, and time-consuming, all in a good way. But it also really drives home the point that you are an originator and a trailblazer in your space. So as an example, I plan on turning some, if not perhaps all, of these Podcasting Your Brand episodes into fully detailed blog posts, because that would be an easy way to repurpose my content and increase my SEO. And the final SEO driving tip for you today is going to focus on the last SEO driver, increasing the average time each visitor spends on your website. Now, obviously, everything else I've already covered with you today does that, but wait, there's more. And the first of these 4 extra elements is one I've already discussed. When you have embedded episode players in your blog posts, you give people a really easy way and reason to keep your website open so they can check out that episode by playing it so conveniently right there. But again, even though a single embedded player that auto updates with your latest episode contains all of your episodes very conveniently is not my recommendation, because it dramatically eats away at the potential SEO impact of having separate blog posts for each episode, you should include an episode-specific player in the particular blog post for each episode. So there you go. And then you can have that all-in-one auto-update player saved for other things, which, again, I'm sure I'll come up with some suggestions for you on future episodes of what to do with those. And in fact, if you have any suggestions on what to do with that all-in-one auto-updating embedded player, send them to me. I'd love to have them. Jaime, Jaime at flintstonemedia.com. And I'll share them right here on the show. I'll be sure to credit you. So sweet. But there are a few other things that I suggest that you do on your website to drive up the SEO for your show in terms of driving up the average visitor time. So the first was those embedded players on each episode's blog post. The second, fun facts. Create some sort of hub of fun facts for your audience that are related to the value of your show. It can be a landing page that lists some of your favorite financial tips from your show on personal finance, or that lists best beaches on the West Coast to travel to if you have a travel-based show. On FloridaPodcastNetwork.com, as an example, I added a couple elements to keep people engaged on the homepage. So there's a banner at the top, literally of fun facts about Florida. It rotates through them, displaying a new one every few seconds. And they're pretty fun and interesting and funny. So it gives a sense of FOMO to scroll or to click away from it. So you want to know what that other weird fact about Florida is. It's about to flash on the screen if you just wait another second. So it works wonders. Then there's also an interactive map of where all the hosts for our shows live. So people can click on the pins to find out about the show with hosts nearest to them, as an example. So what kind of fun fact type content can you add to your website to keep people on? Even just a few extra seconds can be a great impact on your SEO. Number 3, forms. Have at least one form on your website for people to fill in. It can be a form to add themselves to your mailing list, or to download a PDF, or to do both, or to join a virtual event that you have planned, or just to send you a message, whatever, right? But the act of filling out that form adds to your average visitor time. And number 4, have other relevant, valuable, consumable content on your website, such as a video series. And don't miss the opportunity here by just linking to the video on YouTube. Don't do that. Instead, embed the video directly onto the landing page on your website so people can add to your average visitor time by watching it there. You can have an introductory video for your business or your show. That can be really, really great. In fact, that's something that I've been wanting to do for far too long. I need to do an intro video for my business and plop it right there on my homepage, but you can do that. You can have videos of free tips, which is a series of videos that I actually do have on my website. In fact, I mention it at the end of every episode. You can have a how-to or explainer video or series of explainer videos. Seriously, the sky is the limit in terms of additional consumable content. But by having a variety of extra relevant content for people to consume on your website, it will impact your SEO in a great way because it keeps people on your website, which increases your average site visitor time. And as I mentioned at the end of the last episode and somewhere at the top of this episode, I will be providing links in the show notes for you here again to my past Business in the Bedroom episodes, numbers 11, 12, and 13. So you can dive much further into the topic of SEO if you dare and make it a very spooky Halloween indeed. Ooh. But the bottom line I want you to walk away with after these latest episodes is to not get overwhelmed. You can do a lot to create little SEO magnets for your podcast all over the place by A, being aware of using relevant keywords on an ongoing basis, B, posting each episode to your website as its own blog post, and C, adding in other content that draws people in and gets them to stick around. If you can work these few extra ideas and steps into your podcasting efforts, you'll find a lot more listeners coming to find you. So guess what? We've started rolling out episodes of my other show, the Owl Podcast, spelled with 2 W's and 2 L's. So be sure to look that show up and subscribe so we can help you better develop your expertise. And did you know that I also co-host another other podcast? Well, I do. I co-host the Podfest podcast with my dear friend, Glenn the Geek Hebert, founder of the Horse Radio Network. The Podfest podcast is the official show from Podfest Multimedia Expo. And founded by Chris Krimitsos, Podfest is the largest podcasting conference for independent podcasters in the United States. In fact, there's another in-person conference coming up in January. So I'll include a link in the show notes so you can click and you can get a ticket and you can come meet me at Orlando in January. But on the podcast, Glenn and I present each episode of it as a mini Podfest conference experience filled with lessons from past Podfest speakers, some of the best in the industry. So head over to podfestpodcast.com for those episodes, podcasting tips, and our community. That's podfestpodcast.com. And of course, I'll put a link in the show notes for you. And be sure to check out that next in-person conference that's happening in January. Come meet me in Orlando. Head to podfestexpo.com for your ticket. Up next on episode 60, I'll finish up this current round of episodes that have tapped into audience growth and a bit of marketing with another 102 episode, and it will feature the content concepts I recently shared at the Afrozen Audio Conference in my presentation called Structuring Your Podcast with Monetization in Mind. It'll be the first time I have ever served up 2 102 episodes back to back for you in a row. Then after that, I'll bring the show back into more of the craft of podcasting. So if you're not yet subscribed, be sure you do. And in the meantime, I have a whole host of free tips for you on my website. Some of them are in that video series. Some of them are downloadable PDFs, but you won't find out unless you check them out yourself. Just go to flintstonemedia.com/free tips. Thanks for tuning into Podcasting Your Brand. In this chapter of the show, I'm revealing how you can harness the power of podcasting to expand your brand. So come and pick up what I've been putting down since 2014. Avoid common mistakes and propel your podcasting and branding forward. And if you have questions or are interested in becoming a sponsoring brand of this show, don't be shy. Reach out to me at Jaime, spelled Jaime, at flintstonemedia.com. It's producer Jaime wishing you a happy Halloween and signing off for now. Remember, the only thing more powerful than your voice is your spirit to use it. So turn that mic on.